In March 2014, the Financial Times had an article headlined "White Gold Turns New Zealand into the Saudi Arabia of Milk." It was reflective of the hype of the time. Milk had peaked at $8.40. The industry was booming. People really were using the phrase white gold. And in a strange way, the headline was oddly prescient. As we know, milk and oil prices have both dropped sharply since. Today, Fonterra reduced its forecast payout for the current season to $4.15 a kilo of milk solids. It had been $4.60. $8.40 now seems an almost unreal payout. Coming up, I asked Fonterra whether there was sufficient realism at those lofty heights. Should more have been done to remind the farmers borrowing huge money to convert to dairy farming that gravity applies to milk too? But first, let's go to the farm. Allan Crouch, a dairy farmer since 1986, familiar with the cycles and their impact. He's at Ordini, 30 k's northeast of Hamilton. What does he make of $4.15 a kilo?
Well, really I was expecting it. They started off at a $3.85 advance, indicated sort of when they lifted it by 65-70 cents back in November that it really needed to see a lift in GDT levels to maybe over 3,000 a tonne for whole milk powder by early this year, or early 2016, but certainly by mid-16, and that's not going to happen, so I was really expecting it. To be perfectly honest, I was quite surprised to see it get lifted quite so much in November. So we've sort of been glad to get the advances early so we can get out of overdraft, but at the same time not really banking on that forecasted payout to really stay there. So I guess, from our perspective, we were sort of expecting a drop, and the level that it's dropped to, I think, is probably a realistic price for this current season now.
Allan, you've been on that farm since 1986, dairy farming there since 1986, so you are not mortgaged up to the eyeballs, right, I presume, and also you've seen the cycles come and go, the good times and the bad times. If you'd converted in the last, say, 10 years or 5 years with an expectation that prices would sit north of $5 or $6 or even more dollars, how would it be at the moment?
I think you'd probably be nervous. I think over the last maybe 5 or 6 years we have had indicators that the payout would certainly stay north of 6. Last year when it got to 8, or the year before, that was really great, and hopefully people have paid back some debt with that great payout. So people that have converted or borrowed heavily, and unfortunately we had to buy our family members out a couple of years ago, so we've got a reasonable debt level as well. It's really a case of just staying focused on what you're doing, maintaining cost structure, and where possible paying a little bit of debt back, but certainly trying to minimise the impact of this low payout. So people in the past that have banked on maybe expecting the share price to pay it just to stay up where it is, or dividends to stay where they are, maybe pay a little bit too much for cows. It could be hurting them, but it's just a case of staying focused, positive, and looking forward, I think.
Yeah. Has it been realistic? Has it been as realistic as it ought to have been, the dairy industry, in the past decade or so, as those prices began to bolt?
Personally, I think there's been a lot of hype in the industry. I think there's been a groundswell where people have thought, this milk is white gold, let's just get on the train and we can't lose. Unfortunately, it's diluted the value, I believe, the value of what has been built up over the last few decades, or maybe even 100 years within the industry. There's just so much milk out there now being produced, and it's got to find a home that, unfortunately, it's very difficult to find a home for that extra production. So yeah, I think that probably there is a little bit of hype, a little bit of unrealistic hopes from people in the last decade or so, and maybe it is a bit of a reality check now, but that's not a bad thing. Getting people back into the fundamentals of why they enjoy the farming life, why they enjoy dairying. It's not all about the profit at the end of the day, it's about the lifestyle, it's about working with livestock, it's being outside, the camaraderie with other farmers, it's a lot of other things than just the money.
Allan Crouch, dairy farmer, joining us via live view from the farm at Ordini in the Waikato. Let's turn to Fonterra now. Lukas Paravicini is the company's CFO, and I asked him what he and Fonterra make of $4.15 a kilo.
Well, John, this is a very tough situation for our farmers. The imbalance of supply and demand is ongoing. especially due to also a larger supply out of Europe and a slower reaction to the low milk price in Europe. Also, the low oil price has dampened further some of the demand in other regions of the world, and that has made us take the decision to postpone the recovery of the milk price as we had seen in the past.
So, in short, world markets are oversupplied.
World markets have a strong supply, especially out of Europe, and demand is not recovering as fast as we would expect.
Now, if we look at growth in New Zealand, there was a 23% growth in dairy cattle numbers. That's 1.2 million beasts between 2007 and 2012. Aren't we part of the oversupply problem?
I don't think that we are part of the oversupply at all. And, we're looking at a very short-term imbalance, which is also driven by geopolitical decisions like the ban into Russia. Has nothing to do with the fundamental strong dairy demand that is out there and will need that supply we are generating.
It's just, I wonder if we've been cautious enough in our projections and in our long-term planning. Let's look back to the end of last year. Fonterra chief bullish on dairy prices in the Financial Times. Lots of kind of bullish projections. Lots of people converting from non-dairy farming into dairy farming, borrowing a lot of money to do so. And there was a sense, wasn't there, of unreality about all of this?
Listen, our farmers are in this for the long term. They have been here before. And I think the milk price, as like all market commentators comment, will recover later this year. And remember, last year when we said 460, the market expectation was even higher than that. So I do not agree that we have been overly bullish in terms of milk price at all.
So you say at the end of this year, because at the end of last year, Teo Spearing was projecting that it would recover at the beginning of this year. So is there a delay in the recovery?
Well, that's what we try to highlight here, that there is nothing wrong with the fundamentals. It is this short-term imbalance, which will take time to sort out. And remember, this is a forecast. We do take all the estimates, all the information we have, and we'll give our best estimate. And it is an estimate. And we are, even at this stage, at $4.15, it is an estimate. And we caution our farmers constantly that they have to take that into account.
Were you issuing those cautions when it was $8 and thereabouts, when people were talking about white gold, when people were converting like their lives depended on it? Were Fonterra issuing those cautions then?
We did constantly mention that, there is a cycle in the dairy industry. And I think, honestly, at $8.40, everybody enjoyed the milk price. It was a very good milk price, but it was also seen that this would not be prevailing forever. Nobody could foresee the fall so deep after that. And trust me, we all would like to have a more stable milk price rather than this huge volatility.
So, are some people doing it so tough you are worried about their survival? And I guess we're talking about more recent conversions and people who borrowed a lot of money to do so.
This condition, John, you're absolutely right, is very, very tough. And really, our work is focused on building on our strengths and help the farmers through this situation. And our good performance this year, as we have commented in November, our reduction in working capital will allow us to come to our farmers and help them through this cash flow tightness in the next few months.